Elena Moreau stepped into the wedding ceremony at Valmont Castle, a lavish fortress that gathered the world's most powerful elite. Wearing a simple white silk dress, no brand, no shimmer, she instantly became the subject of ridicule. Cruel whispers echoed around her. "Lost your way, waitress?" That dress must have come from a night market. No bridesmaids, no father to walk her down the aisle. Elena walked alone along the cold marble path, under mocking glances and secret phone recordings. A rumor spread like wildfire. The groom isn't coming. "Maybe he got cold feet," someone whispered, swirling their champagne. The laughter grew louder, the sneers multiplied. They mocked everything: her plain dress, her bare hair, her unworthy background to be a billionaire's wife. Suddenly, the glass doors trembled. A helicopter descended onto the Valmont lawn. Silence fell. From the aircraft emerged not just the groom, Nathaniel Cross, founder of a global tech empire, but also Elena's father, the very man they believed was too ill to attend. Nathaniel didn't walk, he ran. Straight to where Elena stood, alone but unshaken. He took her hand, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "I'm sorry for keeping you waiting, Elena, but today, in front of them all, I want them to know I'm not marrying a princess draped in silk. I'm marrying the strongest heart I've ever known." Then Nathaniel turned to face the very crowd that had mocked her. He raised a tablet into the air. "To everyone who insulted my wife, contracts, investments, sponsorships, they're all terminated." Gasps filled the hall. Tycoons, duchesses, princes. Power evaporated with a single command. Amelia, the relative who once humiliated Elena, turned pale as Nathaniel said coldly, "From this moment forward, you are no longer part of the Cross family." The mocking laughter turned to silent dread. Elena stood there, no crown, no diamonds, only a simple silk dress and her quiet brown eyes. But now, all of Valmont had to bow. Valmont Castle, 4:02 p.m. The last light of day streamed through gilded windows, casting a pale golden hue across the marble floor. In that cold, beautiful light, Elena Moreau walked forward in silence. Each step echoed through the grand hall, a bitter reminder. She was alone, out of place, and utterly different. Her simple white silk dress fluttered in the sea breeze. No lace, no crystals, no designer label that could earn even a shred of respect from the eyes watching her. The elite crowd, draped in outfits worth entire fortunes, turned to look at her as if she were something that didn't belong. A soft laugh broke from the left wing, where the VIP seats were dressed in high-end silk. Celeste Moncrief, queen of European banking, leaned toward her friend and whispered, "How did she get past security? I thought this was a wedding, not a charity drive." Sweet voice, every word a blade. The laughter spread, chained whispers giving birth to cruel chuckles. A phone, hidden beneath a champagne flute, snapped a photo of Elena's dress, then sent it to private group chats where every message was another stab. Bride or banquet staff? Guess Cross changed his mind about marrying royalty. What a shame, disaster caught on livestream. From the right aisle, Victor Hargrove, CEO of a billion-dollar blockchain empire, smirked. She walked in like she's looking for the restroom. His girlfriend, an Italian model wearing a pearl-studded Oscar de la Renta gown, couldn't hold back her laughter. "Look at her shoes, straight from a donation bin." Glasses clinked, laughter bounced off the cold stone walls, echoing like a merciless symphony. Elena heard it all. Not a single whisper escaped her ears. Not a single glance of disdain went unnoticed. And still, she walked, slow, steady, regal, as if in the eye of this storm of ridicule, she was walking through the silence of a sacred cathedral. Beneath her modest veil, her brown eyes did not waver, but inside, her heart cracked, quietly, piece by piece. Half a world away, in a small hospital room in New York, an elderly man, Elena's father, held a trembling iPad, watching the moment unfold live. He saw his daughter stand amid silk-draped wolves, heard every insult echoing through the castle. His hands shook, not from illness, but from helpless sorrow. "I'm sorry, Elena. I wish I could be there," he whispered, eyes blurred with tears. Back at Valmont Castle, the cruelty had not reached its end. A large man, the owner of a luxury car brand, raised his glass with a laugh. "Nathaniel's probably canceling the flight. Someone get the poor girl out of here." As if on cue, a wave of laughter erupted, this time no longer polite, no longer hidden. A woman in the front row shook her head with mock pity. A young girl secretly live-streamed, typing, "Wedding disaster of the century." A man in a black tux muttered, "Valmont's reputation just hit rock bottom." And Elena? She gripped her bouquet of white daisies, simple flowers from her beloved father. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, her gaze piercing straight into the crowd. She wasn't a fairy tale princess. She wore no diamond ring. She had no towering family name to shield her. But in that moment, she had herself. And that alone was enough. Beneath the plain satin gown, Elena's footsteps echoed like a lone hymn in a grand cathedral of excess. She walked, alone, toward the floral altar, while the world around her exploded with soft fingertip taps on glowing phone screens. The first photo, her dress. The second, worn-out shoes with a faint scuff on the heel. The third, a close-up of her bouquet. White daisies, humble and cheap, amid a forest of imported Ecuadorian roses. Each image was quickly sent to private chat groups, places where power could not mask contempt. She probably won a charity raffle to be here. Someone get her a real dress. This is humiliating. Valmont's reputation just plummeted. In the VIP section to the right, Victor Hargrove, the blockchain mogul, laughed out loud while viewing the circulating photos. "She looks like a Victorian housemaid, doesn't she?" Beside him, his Italian model date whispered, "Nathaniel Cross really has unique taste." The laughter slithered through the aisles, under marble arches, rising to the vaulted ceilings of Valmont Castle like a virus no one could stop. Some guests took it further, photoshopping Elena's face into memes, comparing her to sitcom characters, and sharing them gleefully, each like a dagger into her dignity. Elena knew. She saw the sideways glances at screens, the sly smirks, the giggles they couldn't hold in. But she didn't stop. She held her back straight, chin high, walking as if each step submerged the ocean of mockery beneath her feet. Beneath the sheer veil, her lips pressed together, not trembling, not broken. Only her deep brown eyes glowed with a quiet, icy fire, the light of a soul that would not yield. At the edge of the balcony overlooking the sea, Amelia Cross, the groom's cousin, draped in high-fashion Chanel, sneered as she leaned into her phone. "Let me live stream this circus for you." She launched the app, set it to private, and captured the image of Elena walking alone in a storm of mockery. Within 5 minutes, the short clip had been forwarded to dozens of elite circles, from Parisian tycoons to Monaco royalty. Captioned, "Valmont's newest charity case." Meanwhile, in New York, inside a small hospital room, Elena's father tried to still his trembling hands. He saw everything, through a fragile screen, saw his daughter turned into a spectacle before the world. He couldn't stand, couldn't run to her, couldn't hold her like he did when she was small. All he could do was cry. "I'm here, Elena. Even if the world turns its back, I see you. And I'm proud." But the tears ran down his face, soaking the cold white sheets beneath him. At Valmont, the cruelty wasn't over. A young man, a Qatari prince's nephew, stood, lifted his phone, and shouted, "Real bride or janitor in disguise." The crowd roared with laughter. There was no decorum now, no more pretend politeness. The laughter thundered like a cruel storm under a cloudless sky. Valmont Castle, a symbol of legacy for centuries, became, in that moment, an arena of arrogance, a playground for cruelty wrapped in silk and diamonds. And Elena? She stood, alone. No one walked with her. No hand reached out. No kind eyes met hers. Only the sea breeze lifted her fragile veil, and her bouquet of daisies trembled in her hand. But she did not cry. She did not falter, because she knew strength does not lie in fabric, not in pedigree, not in the name engraved on an invitation. Strength lies in this, in daring to keep walking when the whole world is waiting for you to fall. Elena Moreau came to a halt before the floral altar, A pristine white archway, adorned with imported roses, stood proudly in the gilded grand hall of Valmont Castle. She stood there, alone, small, like a misplaced brushstroke on the perfect painting the elite had created for themselves. No music played, no words of welcome, only silence. A silence so cold, even the faintest breaths and whispered mockery sounded like blades slicing through silk. From the front row, Amelia Cross, draped in hand-embroidered Chanel, raised her champagne glass to her lips, the corners of her mouth curling into a venomous smile. "She's standing there like some third-rate wax figure," she whispered, just loud enough to spark giggles among her entourage. A man in a Brioni suit leaned forward. Someone ought to escort her back to the nearest shelter. The murmurs rippled, eyes pricked into Elena like needles, cold, calculating, cruel. Some guests pretended to scroll their phones, avoiding her gaze, as if her very presence was a shame they didn't want to be caught acknowledging. Others made no effort to hide their disdain, raising their phones to take more pictures, record more clips, eager to capture another memorable moment to share within their powerful, shadowy circles. And Elena? She stood, hands clenched tightly around a bouquet of white daisies, her eyes fixed ahead, at the very spot where the man she loved most was supposed to be. But he wasn't there. No footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. No doors creaked open. No Nathaniel Cross. The ache inside her began to bleed, not just from the humiliation of the crowd, not just from the cold rejection of a place that once promised to embrace her with love, but from a quiet, piercing question. Did he really abandon me? She thought of her father, lying in a hospital bed, believing his daughter would find happiness today. She thought of her mother, who once told her love saw no wealth, no class. She thought of all she had given up, years working in African humanitarian missions, turning down easier paths and easier loves, all for a love she believed was true. And now, beneath crystal chandeliers, under countless judging eyes, amidst a sea of hatred, she stood alone. An elderly woman from a Dutch banking family leaned toward her friend, voice dipped in disdain. As expected, country girls never belong in places like this. A Japanese gentleman, the owner of a luxury hotel empire, adjusted his tie and sighed. Cross has humiliated himself. Elena heard every word, every insult, a blade, every glance, a chain tightening around her chest. But she didn't crumble, because she knew if she broke now, if she ran, if she cried in front of them, they'd win. And Elena Moreau, the girl who grew up in a damp Brooklyn basement, the scholar who earned every accolade with blood and grit, the woman who rebuilt a school in Nairobi with her bare hands, would never allow herself to be defeated. She drew in a deep breath, stood tall, held her dress steady, and fixed her gaze on the far end of the hall, where Nathaniel was meant to appear, with a fragile hope still flickering, however faint, not yet gone. In New York, in a quiet hospital room, her father stared at the iPad screen, holding his breath, his hands clenched white. "Don't fall, Elena. You are my light." Inside Valmont's grand hall, the wall clock chimed softly. 4:05 p.m. Time passed like a silent verdict. The nightmare stretched with every breath. And while Dior gowns shimmered and Tom Ford tuxedos glowed under the chandeliers, the entire room sank into a heavy silence. A silence so sharp, it cut without words. They didn't need to speak anymore. They had delivered their judgment. All that was left was for her to surrender. But Elena didn't surrender. Not today, not here, not to them. Elena Moreau still stood there, in front of the empty wedding altar, as the clock at Valmont ticked forward with agonizing slowness. 4:08 p.m. 3 minutes. 3 minutes that felt like 3 centuries in breathless silence. The crowd was no longer laughing. They simply stared, like spectators studying a strange creature trapped behind glass. And the silence was not the silence of reverence, but of contempt, callousness, and cruel indifference. A lady in a Givenchy gown leaned toward her friend, voice soft as silk but sharp as needles. Pity, really, but if she claims she belonged, she has to face the consequences. A young man with slicked back hair, the heir to an oil fortune, sneered, Why not cue some funeral music? This scene needs a tragic violin. A stray chuckle erupted from a corner of the hall. Gone were the pretenses. Gone was any restraint. They were satisfied now, seeing Elena alone, abandoned, a living proof that they were right, and she was the mistake. Elena felt every cut, not on her skin, but deep beneath it, in her pride, in the heart trembling to stay upright. Every giggle, every glance, every whispered cruelty. They scraped and wore down the last fragments of strength she still clung to. She remembered the nights sitting by her mother's hospital bed, reading English books, hoping to one day change her life. She remembered dusty afternoons in Nairobi, the red wind blowing her plain dress as she taught children under a broken roof. She remembered the way her father looked at her when he handed her the bouquet of white daisies before she left. My daughter, the strongest soul in the world. And now, in the proud halls of Valmont, surrounded by silk and diamonds, Elena was being crushed, bit by bit. 4:09 p.m. A glass shattered against the marble floor. No one turned. No one cared. All eyes remained locked on the girl in white standing alone, waiting for her to fall. A young girl, the granddaughter of a Hong Kong billionaire, raised her phone and began live streaming with the title, Love, Disaster of the Century. Bride abandoned at the altar. Comments flooded in. So embarrassing. Serves her right. Poor girls should know their place. Lesson: never reach above your class. Half a world away, Elena's father clutched his iPad with trembling hands. Tears clouded his vision, blurring the screen. Please, enough. Stop hurting her, he whispered, the words caught in a throat gone dry. But he couldn't stop this nightmare. No one could. Valmont Castle, 4:10 p.m. Another minute passed. The storm of cruelty pressed on, not with words, but with cold, punishing silence. It felt like a death sentence, unspoken but absolute. And then, a strange sound split the stillness. From the cliffs behind the castle came a low, growing rumble, the sound of a helicopter approaching. The crowd stirred. Some looked up, frowning in irritation. Others murmured, "Who was that?" This wasn't on the schedule. Elena lifted her gaze, her chest tightening. A fragile spark of hope broke through the thick ice that had gripped her for the past 10 minutes. Maybe. She clenched her bouquet of white daisies, daring not to hope too much, but unable to stop her heart from pounding for the first time in what felt like forever. An older man, the owner of a luxury hotel empire, grumbled, "What now? This wedding is already a farce." A refined Italian woman shook her head. "Maybe it's the cleanup crew." The helicopter drew closer, the wind from its blades lifting the hem of Elena's simple satin dress. And in that moment, amid the rising wind and the roar of propellers shaking the very walls of Valmont, Elena stood tall. She raised her head, her eyes fixed on the open sky. Because deep within her, a familiar voice, her mother's, her father's, whispered gently, "Never bow to cruelty, my daughter." And Elena Moreau, the abandoned bride, the girl in the simple dress, the one mocked by the world, smiled, a small smile, soft as breeze, yet strong as waves crashing ashore, because she knew this story is not over yet. The wind from the helicopter blades howled through the gilded windows of Valmont Castle, sending silk tablecloths flying and tipping champagne glasses worth thousands. Several guests clutched at their gowns, frowning in irritation. Others, the cruelest among them, glanced toward the castle lawn with clear annoyance. Who's ruining such a perfect performance? A sleek black helicopter, clearly not part of the logistics crew, descended slowly onto the Valmont lawn, right by the cliff's edge overlooking the Mediterranean. The crowd, who had moments ago watched Elena like she was some form of entertainment, now began to feel something different. Worry. Elena didn't move. The wind whipped at her silk dress, pressing it against her slender frame. Her thin veil fluttered wildly, like a silver flag in a losing war. But she didn't turn away. Her gaze, steady, calm, deep, locked onto the moment as though some quiet voice had long whispered to her, "He will come." The helicopter door opened. The wind roared louder. Elena's long brown hair flew like silk in the sky. And then, from the dim cabin, A tall figure stepped down. Nathaniel Cross. Not in the grand tuxedo scheduled for the ceremony. No tie, no pocket square, just a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal sun-kissed wrists. A charcoal gray jacket draped casually over his shoulders. Black dress shoes dusted with soil. And in his arms, not a bouquet, not a ring, but an elderly man, thin and frail, dressed in a modest blue suit. Elena's father. The entire Valmont hall froze. Celeste Moncrief, queen of European banking, lowered her champagne glass, her face gone pale. Victor Hargrove, blockchain tycoon, recoiled like he'd swallowed glass. Amelia Cross, Nathaniel's cousin, turned ghost white, her grip on her wine glass so tight it cracked. Nathaniel didn't walk. He ran. He ran across the soft grass, careless of the mud that splashed his expensive shoes, careless of the sea spray dusting his suit. His face, windswept and sunlit, wore no mask, not anger, not pride, but pure, frantic worry. Like a man terrified that he had arrived too late. Elena was stunned. She could barely believe her eyes. The father, doctors said, couldn't be moved. The father who had cried over an iPad screen for the past hour now stood there on the lawn, held in the arms of the man she loved. Whispers rose like a rising tide. What the hell is going on? Is that her father? I can't believe this. The same phones that had just mocked her now trembled in their owners' hands. Private group chats, once filled with cruelty, suddenly fell silent. Nathaniel walked straight toward Elena. Each step shattered a layer of the cold judgment blanketing the castle. Each breath he took was a silent proclamation. She will not suffer another second. Reaching her, he gently placed her father into her arms, bowed his head low, and whispered, voice rough with emotion, I'm sorry. I'm a few minutes late. But I promised your father that today you wouldn't walk alone. Elena collapsed into her father's shoulder. The tears she had held back for so long finally broke free. But they weren't tears of humiliation, not tears of defeat. They were the tears of a warrior finally reunited with her shield. Nathaniel clasped her hand, his ocean blue eyes brimming with pride. From this moment on, you never have to face the world alone again. In the front row, the once smirking faces turned to stone. Amelia Cross lowered her head, unable to meet Nathaniel's eyes. Victor Hargrove fumbled for his phone, frantically texting, trying to salvage what he could. Celeste Moncrief forced a weak social smile, but her lips were trembling. Valmont Castle had changed. It was no longer a stage for arrogance. It had become a battlefield, where truth had begun to rise. The roar of the helicopter blades gradually faded. The Valmont lawn returned to stillness, a stillness no longer cold and contemptuous, but different. Elena gripped Nathaniel's hand, like a drowning soul finally pulled to shore. Beside her, her father, the frail old man who had crossed continents just to hold her hand, stood silently, eyes brimming with tears. There was no more room for sorrow, only room for resurrection. Nathaniel turned to face the crowd, the elite guests, the glittering faces who had spared no cruelty toward Elena. The sea breeze tousled his hair, and in those deep blue eyes, there was no longer gentleness. There was a storm. He stepped onto a raised platform, standing before them all, steady, resolute. Nathaniel Cross, the self-made billionaire who built a tech empire from nothing, needed no microphone. His voice, hoarse yet commanding, cut through the falseness hanging over Valmont Castle. Today, I heard everything. Every laugh, every whisper, every condescending look. No one dared speak, no one dared move. The once proud faces lowered. The hands that had once snapped mocking photos now trembled in their laps. Nathaniel raised a sleek tablet. With a single swipe, documents lit up the screen. Investment contracts, strategic partnerships, multi-year financial ties with the very people now seated below him. He read each name, as cold and final as a verdict. Celeste Moncrief, European Banking Group, $2.3 billion credit agreement, terminated. Victor Hargrove, Blockchain Consortium, Series D funding, revoked. Amelia Cross, cousin, struck from the Cross family inheritance. Each sentence fell like a lightning bolt. Celeste turned ghost white, lips trembling in silent plea. Victor pulled out his phone, calling frantically. No one answered. Amelia nearly collapsed, clinging to her chair, lips quivering uncontrollably. Nathaniel stepped forward, his eyes sharp as glass. I want no part of anyone who mocks the woman I love. If you thought you could trample someone's dignity because her dress lacked a designer label, then you've forgotten who truly deserves respect. The wind swept through the hall. Silk tablecloths fluttered like white flags of surrender. No more laughter, no more glances. Valmont Castle, a fortress of wealth and status, had, in that instant, been leveled by a greater force, justice. Nathaniel lowered his arm. His voice, now softer, held a different kind of power, undeniable and absolute. I, Nathaniel Cross, declare, from this day forward, anyone who ridiculed Elena Moreau has no place in any venture, deal, or power structure I control. A British gentleman, Sir Oliver Crane, son of a duke, stammered, Nathaniel, we were just joking. Nathaniel looked him straight in the eye. When a joke wounds someone, it ceases to be a joke. It becomes cruelty. In the fading afternoon light, beneath the crystal chandeliers, on embroidered carpets and cold marble floors, justice was served. Elena took her father's hand, lips trembling, not from fear, not from shame, but because, for the first time in her life, she felt truly protected, truly respected, truly loved, with nothing held back. And the world before her, the very world that once crushed her under glitter and pride, was now on its knees. In that breathless moment inside Valmont Castle, as kings of finance and queens of society stood frozen beneath crystal chandeliers, as the old world of power was wiped away with a single declaration, Nathaniel Cross did not stop. He stood in the center of the grand hall, his deep blue eyes sweeping across every face, without mercy. Then he turned to Elena, took her hand, and gently led her forward. You laughed at Elena Moreau, Nathaniel began, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. You saw her as a poor girl, a nobody, someone without worth. You were wrong. The entire hall fell into stunned silence. Dozens of eyes locked onto Elena, the woman in a simple silk dress, no diamonds, no crown. And Nathaniel, the man holding her hand, stood like a god unveiling the truth to the blind. At 19, Elena Moreau won a prestigious British Council scholarship from a tiny apartment in Brooklyn. By 21, she spoke 5 languages fluently and translated humanitarian documents for the United Nations in Africa. At 24, she led an education relief program for over 30,000 children in some of the world's poorest regions. Gasps rang out. A few guests exchanged shameful glances, faces flushed red. Nathaniel tightened his grip on her hand, grounding her with strength. While you wore Versace and toasted with Dom Perignon, she wore dust and sun, sat beneath searing tin roofs, and wrote hope into forgotten lives. Every word he spoke landed like a hammer blow, shattering Valmont Castle brick by brick, stripping away its gilded vanity and exposing its hollow core. You thought she didn't belong here? Then let me tell you, it's you who don't deserve to stand beside her. In Nathaniel's hand, the tablet lit up. Images projected onto the vaulted stone above the altar. Elena cradling a laughing African child under the blazing sun. Elena beneath a metal roof, red pen in hand, correcting a student's work. Elena, in modest clothes, sitting with international leaders at a relief summit. The final image appeared. Elena Moreau, standing in a red dust field in Nairobi, holding a wooden sign that read, Education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. And in the photo, those same eyes, quiet, steady, needing no crown to shine. In the Valmont Grand Hall, those who once mocked her now dared not raise their heads, because they knew, before them stood not a poor girl to be pitied, but a warrior. An older man, Sir William St. John, a veteran UN diplomat, rose to his feet and bowed deeply toward Elena. A single applause rang out, then another, and then the entire Valmont Castle, slowly, like a tide-gathering force, began to applaud. Tentatively at first, then with thunderous conviction. Elena Moreau, the bride with no crown, had conquered an empire with nothing but her heart, her strength, and her unwavering grace. Nathaniel leaned toward her and whispered, You never needed Valmont to accept you. Valmont needs you to become worthy. And as the crimson sunset bathed the castle in gold, as applause echoed through every archway, corridor, and corner, Elena smiled, fully for the first time. Valmont Castle bathed in the golden glow of dusk, the final rays of sunlight piercing through the towering stained glass windows like divine judgment. Beneath the gilded arches, in the breathless hush of the world's most powerful figures, the reckoning had begun. Nathaniel Cross stood beside Elena Moreau, his hand clasped tightly around hers, as if nothing could separate them again. In his other hand, he held a tablet, now wielded like a sword of justice. He scanned the crowd. His voice rang out, each word etching itself into the cold stone walls. Today is not just my wedding day. Today is the day the arrogant pay their dues. He raised the tablet and projected a list onto the vaulted ceiling above, a list of individuals permanently removed from all projects, contracts, and financial alliances tied to Cross Enterprises. Each name appeared on screen, along with their estimated financial losses. Celeste Moncrief, $1.8 billion in assets to be lost within 24 hours due to canceled credit agreements. Victor Hargrove, $700 million blockchain venture frozen, facing immediate bankruptcy. Amelia Cross, erased from the Cross family inheritance, stripped of access to all shared assets. Oliver Crane, international hotel contract terminated. Projected losses exceeding $500 million. Every name Nathaniel read out brought a gasp, a sob, a collapse. Celeste sank into her chair, her jewel-laden hands trembling, lips pale with desperation. No, this can't be. Nathaniel, please, give me a second chance. Victor muttered hopelessly into his phone. Call the lawyer, save the stock, save the company. Amelia, once proud and cruel, now knelt, her Chanel dress stained by the marble floor, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Nathaniel, I was wrong. Please forgive me. But Nathaniel didn't flinch, his eyes, blue, unwavering, cold as steel. I forgive you, he said, his voice deep and hoarse. But I will never allow you to hurt her again. And Cross Enterprises will never tolerate cruelty disguised as civility. Applause, this time, not alone, rose from the far end of the hall. Some guests, truly moved by Elena, stood and clapped with visible emotion, a small wave, but growing, powerful. Sir William Street John, the esteemed diplomat, stepped forward, hand over heart. Miss Moreau, today you reminded the world that courage, kindness, and dignity are worth more than any diamond. An Asian prince rose and bowed deeply before Elena. A former American tech rival of Nathaniel clasped her hands in silent respect. Elena Moreau, the woman in an unbranded silk dress, now stood at the summit of honor, not because of money, not because of power, but because of her heart, the one thing this elite world had gravely underestimated. Left behind, Celeste, Victor, Amelia, and all those who had mocked Elena stood surrounded by nothing but their own disgrace and ruin. Their collapse wasn't loud, but it was absolute. One of them cried out, "Who are we to bow before a nobody?" And in that very moment, Nathaniel replied, quietly, icily, "You're not bowing to her, you're bowing to the truth." Beneath the golden twilight, on the lawns of Valmont, amid thunderous applause, justice was delivered. Elena needed no crown, no castle, no glittering name in a billionaire's ledger. All she needed was her dignity. And today, the world had recognized her. As the applause slowly faded, as eyes filled with shame lowered to the ground, as castles of arrogance crumbled in silence, Elena Moreau and Nathaniel Cross still stood, hand in hand beneath the blazing Valmont sunset. They needed no procession, no orchestral swell, no luxury rituals or golden fanfare. They only needed each other. Elena's father, who had crossed continents and risked his health just to witness this moment, stepped forward slowly, placed his daughter's hand into Nathaniel's. He looked at Nathaniel, aged eyes shining with undimmed clarity. Cherish her. There is nothing in this world more precious than a heart that dares to love with all its strength. Nathaniel bowed deeply. I swear. The officiant, with a warm, grounded voice, didn't give a long speech. He simply asked, Elena Moreau, Do you vow to offer your hand to this man in honor, trust, and undying love? Elena tightened her grip on Nathaniel's hand. Her brown eyes, once quiet, once burdened, now glowed with the purest light. I do. Her voice was steady, unwavering, like a sacred hymn in the evening wind. Nathaniel Cross, do you vow to protect her, not only from the world, but from the weakness within yourself? Nathaniel smiled gently, the smile of a man who had found the rarest treasure on earth. I do. No $1,000,000 rings, no golden carpets, only two hands, intertwined, and a new world, beginning in that very moment. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Elena lifted her head and looked around the Valmont Grand Hall, once filled with mockery, now bowed in reverent silence. She wore no crown, no royal cloak, yet Elena Moreau, in her simple silk gown, was a queen without a throne, a true queen, honored not by diamonds, but by courage. Nathaniel leaned in and whispered in her ear, I'll build a world where you'll never have to walk alone again. Elena smiled, soft as the last light of day. We'll build it together. Amid the whispering sea breeze drifting through ancient archways, under the golden twilight that lit the Valmont fields, two souls, once alone, once broken, walked out of the grand hall, hand in hand. Each step they left behind on the grass wasn't a mark of power, but of hope. Valmont Castle, witness to centuries of false grandeur, for the first time in its history, bore witness to something real, a love that needed no gold, no titles, only a heart and a promise. And in that moment, the whole world bowed to Elena Moreau, not for what she had, but for what she had done.